Inside the boathouses, there is a microscopic layer of red-colored ash, evidence of human blood.
Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're counting down our picks for the real-life tragedies that are even more chilling than the scariest horror movies.
I wanted to see just what kind of verbal abuse that people can take before they start objecting, before they start flashing back.
Number 30, the Flannan Isles Lighthouse Mystery.
As the ship approached the rocky island, Moore felt a deep sense of foreboding. Could something terrible have happened to the three keepers?
Disappearances occur every day, and sometimes are never solved. In 1900, a relief keeper arrived at Flannan Isles Lighthouse, only to discover no trace of the three men who had been manning it. He was met with proof of recent life, such as unmade beds and a set of abandoned oilskins. Even after the area was searched, no sign of the trio was found, dead or alive.
I have a feeling on this island of tension, even just walking about.
There was no definitive explanation for their vanishing, although one investigator suspected they may have been swept into the water during rough weather. Some even believe that paranormal forces are behind the losses. Whether their fates were natural or not, it remains one of the creepiest cold cases in modern history.
Can come up with all sorts of ideas of what could have happened. But I think one thing, sure, nobody will come up with a definite answer now.
Number 29, Radium Girls. It's no secret that workplace conditions in the United States used to be incredibly dangerous. The Radium Girls, female laborers that painted dials, are a grim reminder of that fact. They had been told their materials were harmless, and had even been told to use their lips to get a smaller point on their brushes. This led to them ingesting high amounts of radium over an extended period. At first, the side effects were small, mostly consisting of loose teeth. They soon devolved into much worse symptoms, including necrotic jaws and unwanted sterilization.
And I'm sure these people didn't like to go down there to Luminous, especially if they were thinking maybe this stuff is bad for us after some of their friends died.
By 1924, a dozen women had died, and were the targets of smear campaigns blaming them rather than the unsafe practices. It wasn't until the paint's inventor passed that they finally saw justice.
Dear sisters, the New Jersey League of Women Voters is working to set a legal precedent for radium toxicity. Because of you.
Number 28, the Franklin Expedition.
The last known location of the ships was found in this letter left by Franklin's crew. The final coordinates just north of King William Island.
Some attempts at exploration ended in tragedy before they could even truly begin. Sir John Franklin had good intentions, with hopes of mapping out an uncharted area of the Northwest Passage. They set sail in May of 1845, and just over a year later, disaster struck. Both ships had gotten stuck in the ice, trapping over 100 men. They were forced to set up camp there, which would prove fatal, as 24 died from a litany of causes, ranging from starvation to lead poisoning. Further investigations done on the bones revealed marks, indicating that some may have even turned to cannibalism in an attempt to survive. In 1848, the survivors attempted to escape, but were never seen again.
John, can we sleep? Yes.
Number 27, Gheorghe Doja's execution. Unsuccessful revolutions could end in terrible tragedy for those who mounted them. In the 1510s, Gheorghe Doja attempted to lead a revolt against the noble family ruling Hungary at the time. He was initially successful, even gaining control of multiple fortresses. When he was finally caught, he was swiftly reminded of his place. Doja was forced to sit on a burning throne and wear an equally hot crown, simultaneously torturing and mocking him. Pliers were then shoved into his skin, and members of his revolt were forced to eat his skin or risk being punished themselves. And 70,000 commoners were tortured, fracturing the country even further. Number 26, Uruguayan Air Force Flight 571.
What do you remember about the crash?
About the crash, I thought I was going to die.
Cannibalism is considered beyond the pale, and yet in some situations, it becomes an unfortunate reality. It soon became the only option for the survivors on the Uruguayan Air Force Flight 571 after they crashed into the Andes Mountains in 1972, killing a dozen on impact. After a rescue aircraft failed to notice them, the search was called off, leaving them to fend for themselves. Another 13 passed from a combination of an avalanche and the constant exposure, and when they ran out of food, they turned to their fallen in order to survive.
El hambre es insoportable. Hasta ahora, los Strauch consiguieron que la carne sea solo carne.
After months of enduring the awful conditions, they were finally able to find rescue, with only 16 of the 45 occupants surviving to the end.
To some of the boys, the Andes can be a spiritual experience. To another boy, it can be the avalanche. To another one, it can be the cold. To another one, it can be the hunger.
Number 25, Haj Mohammed Mesfewi's execution. The death penalty has been used since the beginning of human civilization, with countless methods being employed to bring people to justice, permanently. Some executions have been so intense that they've been the cause of scrutiny and horror. One of the most punitive killings in history was inflicted upon Haj Mohammed Mesfewi, a man convicted of murdering at least 36 women. At first, officials were opting for either crucifying or beheading him, making sure to whip him daily while they made their decision. Eventually, they decided on something even more torturous, sealing him alive behind a wall.
Help! Help me! Help! Help me! Help!
He begged for mercy throughout and was heard screaming for 2 days afterwards until he finally fell silent, forever. Number 24, Attack of the Dead Men. It sounds like something you would come across in a scary movie or video game, but to hundreds of German soldiers, it was all too real. World War I was known for its high death toll and the popularization of chemical warfare, with the latter leading to one of its most horrifying battles. On August 6, 1915, the German military attacked Russian fighters with a combination of poisonous gas, bromine, and chlorine, a noxious mix that would kill most instantly. The assailants thought the same, until they attempted to storm the area and were met by the still-standing oppositional forces. Even as they coughed up pieces of their own organs and bodily fluids, they stood their ground, even forcing their enemy to retreat. Number 23, the Murder of Junko Furuta. Sometimes the punishment doesn't seem to fit the crime. One example of this occurred following the capture, torture, and eventual murder of 17-year-old Junko Furuta. In 1989, 4 teenage boys kidnapped her and put her through 44 days of pure hell. She was repeatedly burned, beaten, and sexually assaulted, to the point where she begged for death. After one last brutal assault, she finally succumbed to her injuries and passed. The indignities she suffered are worse than in many horror movies. Even after her corpse was found and her murderers arrested, many feel she did not receive appropriate justice. Her assailants' identities were initially hidden due to their age, and the sentences imposed were considered by many to be too lenient. Number 22, Renaissance zombies. They may not be the creatures you've come to recognize in modern media, but they were just as terrifying at the time. The first major outbreak of syphilis hit Naples around 1495, following France's invasion of the city. As a result, hundreds were afflicted, resulting in horrific physical side effects. Most patients' bodies were covered in painful blisters, and in some cases, their skin would fall right off their faces. Many died just a few months after contracting it, but before that, their disease-ridden appearances led to them inadvertently emulating the living dead. The strain they had been afflicted with was far more lethal than its modern counterpart, and hopefully, modern medicine will keep it from rearing its ugly head once more. Number 21, heir to Jameson whiskey buying child for cannibals. It may be difficult not to think of this the next time you're perusing the liquor store. While the actual founder of Jameson whiskey is innocent of this horror, one of his heirs can't say the same.
In order to stand out, he knew he needed the highest quality ingredients money could buy. Now, it's been more than 200 years since John filled his first order, and we care more than ever about the quality of our barley and water.
During a visit to Africa in the 19th century, James Sligo Jameson was informed that the tribe completed some celebrations by partaking in cannibalism. He allegedly ended up trading 6 handkerchiefs for the chance to see the act for himself. He soon got what he asked for and more, as a group of men brutally murdered and ate a young slave girl, who reportedly didn't scream once. To make things more disturbing, Jameson sketched out the entire act, documenting it and his wretched curiosities all at once. Number 20. The funeral procession of Pope Pius XII. Pope Pius XII served as the Vatican sovereign from 1939 until his death in 1958 at the age of 82. Due to the Pope's insistence on keeping his deceased body the way God created it, his personal physician, Riccardo Galeazzi Lisi, decided on an unconventional embalming method.
I told you he didn't want to be embalmed or made up.
But people need a viewing.
Galeazzi Lisi refused to drain the corpse of its fluids, instead relying on an experimental series of oils and resins and wrapping the body in plastic afterwards. The intense heat in the area, combined with the lack of air circulation, caused the cadaver to decompose. During the funeral procession, the chest of the corpse imploded. The body ended up turning a bright green.
None of us could breathe. Somewhere under those bushes was the rest of Ray Brower.
Number 19. The Essex inspires Moby Dick. On August 12, 1819, the whaling ship Essex left Nantucket for a trip to South America. The voyage lasted a little over a year before tragedy struck in November 1820. A massive sperm whale attacked the ship and essentially sank it, causing the survivors to enter small whaleboats. They floundered in these little vessels for over 3 months on the open ocean, with barely enough food and supplies to survive.
Hey, what are y'all looking at? I'm fine. You haven't potted? Fit as a fiddle. Fit as a goddamn fiddle. You hear me?
Slowly, the men began dying, and the others had to resort to consuming their companions. At some point, they even drew lots to determine who would be killed to feed the group. Only 8 of the 21 men survived, and the story inspired Herman Melville to write his great American novel.
The great shroud of the sea rolls over the Pequod, her crew, and Moby Dick.
Number 18. The Nutty Putty Cave Incident. John Edwards Jones suffered an absolutely horrific death that is quite literally the stuff of nightmares. On the evening of November 24, 2009, Jones was exploring Utah's Nutty Putty Cave with his brother when he became trapped. The 26-year-old had mistaken a tight passageway for the infamous birth canal and found himself stuck upside down.
Stuck in that position for going on 23 hours now makes it very difficult for him.
His body remained compressed and inverted for 28 hours. Rescue workers attempted to free Jones using a rope and pulley system, but their efforts failed. Due to his precarious position, his heart went into cardiac arrest and he eventually passed away. It was decided that Jones's corpse would remain in place and that he would be entombed within the now sealed cave.
You promised to tell Emily that no matter what, I'll be there when the baby is born.
Number 17. Minnie Dean. New Zealand established capital punishment in 1840, and it was completely abolished by 1989. In that time, 85 inmates were executed. Minnie Dean was the only woman to receive that fate. Dean worked as a baby farmer. Basically, she was paid to adopt other people's children.
Look, I don't have time for all these legalities.
1 second, Dad. I have the adoption papers.
She took in numerous kids, and many started dying or disappearing. While infant mortality was high at the time, the deaths were exceeding the norm, and Dean started attracting attention. She was eventually arrested for homicide. Due to lax record keeping, it's hard to determine how many people died under Dean's care. However, 3 bodies were unearthed in her garden following her arrest. She was hanged on September 2, 1844. Number 16. The death of Maximillian Robespierre. French lawyer Maximilien Robespierre is one of the defining and most divisive names of the French Revolution. Although initially beloved, Robespierre's ambitions grew too great, which eventually corroded his public reputation.
Qu'est-ce qui se passe?
Oh, il parle encore.
Réveille-moi quand il aura fini.
Upon his arrest on July 27, 1794, Robespierre reportedly attempted to take his own life with a pistol but failed. The incident left him with a damaged jaw, which was kept together with a bandage. He was then taken to the Place de la Révolution to be executed. The officer in charge, Charles-Henri Sanson, removed the bandage, leaving Robespierre's jaw to hang loose. He was reportedly in pain until he was beheaded.
Notez, nous devons fermer les portes de la ville, interdire tous les journaux, arrêter tous les journalistes, et lancer des mandats d'arrêt contre les meneurs de la Convention.
Number 15, the Donner Party. Composed of multiple pioneer families, the Donner Party sought to move from the Midwest to California in the mid-1840s. Halfway into the trip, the group decided to take a new shortcut called the Hastings Cutoff, which was a much more difficult terrain to cross. As they traveled further, they became snowbound in the Sierra Nevada, and the wagon train was unable to penetrate the snow.
We have to leave the wagon! Keep them moving! They can go no further! Unhitch the animals!
To survive the harsh winter, the party was forced to camp at the nearby Truckee Lake. The cold in this region soon became unbearable, leading to the deaths of multiple people. With very little supplies, the survivors had to resort to consuming their deceased companions. In all of the party's 87 members, only 48 lived to tell the tale.
They had to resort to cannibalism in order to stay alive.
Number 14, the experiments of Nikolai Cnogorski. Soviet neurologist Ivan Pavlov is famous for his conditioning experiments on dogs, resulting in the widely used term Pavlovian response.
See, Pavlov was a science guy, and every time his dog would ring a bell, Pavlov would eat.
But what many do not know is that his tinkerings led to a devastating outcome. Pavlov had an assistant named Nikolai Cnogorski, who continued with his mentor's experiments. However, this assistant conducted his test on young subjects he acquired through orphanages. The subjects were outfitted with a device that measured the amount of saliva emanating directly from their glands when they were given food. Unfortunately, the method of installing these devices was frankly atrocious. Cnogorski experimented on these test subjects, presumably in a bid to prove that humans can be easily conditioned, just like dogs.
Stop it, please! I beg you! It's a sin!
Number 13, Jonestown. American preacher Jim Jones created a doomsday cult called the People's Temple. In the 1970s, Jones moved his congregation to an isolated area in Guyana, where they established a remote settlement called Jonestown. That became the site of one of the most infamous crimes involving American lives.
Started as an effort by a charismatic preacher to build a new society, but it ended, of course, with the tragic deaths of more than 900 people.
After disturbing details from the settlement came to light, U.S. Congressman Leo Ryan traveled to Guyana with some concerned relatives of the Jonestown members. Concluding that his cult had failed, Jones reportedly ordered the killing of Ryan, who was later shot at a nearby airstrip. Jones then led his entire congregation to ingest a drink poisoned with cyanide. This resulted in the deaths of 909 people, becoming one of the worst massacres in American history.
We've had as much of this world as you're going to get. Let's just be done with it. Let's be done with the agony of it.
Number 12, the Stanford Prison Experiment.
Does the situation outside of you, the institution, come to control your behavior, or does the things inside of you, your attitudes, your values, your morality?
If you need proof that power corrupts, look no further than the highly controversial Stanford Prison Experiment. This social test was conducted from August 14th through the 20th, 1971, and saw student volunteers playing fake prisoners and prison authorities. The goal of the experiment, led by Professor Philip Zimbardo, was to study the effects of unchecked power in prison guards.
The negative environment Zimbardo chose to test his ideas was a prison. He would convert the basement of the university's psychology department into a subterranean jail.
The experiment quickly flew off the rails, with some of the guard students veering into psychological torture by enacting extreme measures, including psychological abuse and harassment. That said, the experiment's methodology is extremely contentious, as it had repeatedly been compromised by Zimbardo's goading. Some of the prisoners also knew the study's hypothesis and acted accordingly, which is an unwanted variable in psychological experiments called demand characteristics.
At this rate, we're gonna be here all goddamn night. And I love it.
Number 11, Octavia Hatcher. The story of Octavia Hatcher is a popular one around the small town of Pikeville, Kentucky. The legend states that the young mother fell sick and passed away a few months after she gave birth to a son, who died shortly after delivery. Due to the southern heat, they buried her very quickly. Soon after her death, however, other locals seemingly showed similar symptoms, only to recover. The culprit, retrospectively, was likely encephalitis. Locals promptly dug up Hatcher's grave and realized that she didn't die, but had fallen into a coma. They found evidence of her having woken up, including scratches on the coffin and Hatcher's bloody nails. The veracity of the story has been questioned, but according to a member of Big Sandy Heritage Center's board of directors, quote, most local historians do agree that Hatcher did fall ill and was buried alive. Number 10. The Curse of King Tut. Even if you don't believe in curses, there's no denying that there's something spooky about this story.
I believe if I can see it and I can touch it, then it's real. That's what I believe.
I believe in being prepared.
Egyptologist Howard Carter found the tomb of King Tutankhamun in 1922, and various members of his team were immediately struck with health issues. The first to die was financier Lord Carnarvon, who passed away from blood poisoning after a mosquito bite became infected. Within a dozen years, more people involved in the excavation were dead, including Carter's personal secretary Richard Bethel. Carter himself died in 1939, nearly 20 years after opening the tomb. But his death is still attributed to the curse. The story even attracted the attention of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who linked Carnarvon's death to mythical beings called elementals.
I don't think I'm a nut. Don't want no fancy funeral. Just one like old King Tut.
Number 9. Advice to animal owners. Can you imagine killing your own pet? Unfortunately, that was a reality that many in pre-World War II Britain were forced to face. Pets were seen as an unwanted nuisance in wartime, as they would either roam the streets following a bombing or eat the already limited and rationed food. A committee was formed to solve the problem, and their solution was unimaginably horrific. They released a pamphlet advising pet owners to either release them into the countryside or have them euthanized. Included in the papers was an ad for a captive bolt pistol, said to be, quote, the standard instrument for the humane destruction of domestic animals. All told, an estimated 750,000 pets were killed in a week, more than 107,000 per day. Number 8. Recycling deceased soldiers.
If there is anything in this world about which I know positively nothing, it is agriculture.
Turns out there's nothing better for farming than human bone. The Napoleonic Wars cost upwards of 2 million soldiers their lives, and it was common practice for the survivors to loot the dead for supplies. This included tearing out teeth with pliers for use in dentures. The Battle of Waterloo proved especially fruitful for the denture market, and the resulting products became known as Waterloo teeth. Battlegrounds were also looted for bones after the dead had decomposed, and these bones were ground into dust and sold to farmers. A British paper from 1822 reported that human bone made for, quote, substantial manure. Number 7. Knocking in space.
You copy?
Yes, I copy. I'm
Give me your position.
I don't know. I'm spinning. I can't.
Imagine you're an astronaut and you're all alone floating through the quiet vacuum of space in your cozy little spacecraft. And then you hear someone or something knocking. It's enough to make you go mad.
But the thing is that I'm still scared. I'm really scared. Nobody will mourn for me. No one will pray for my soul.
Luckily, astronaut and famed knock hearer Yang Li Wei didn't go mad, but he was understandably creeped out. Li Wei attempted to replicate the knocking sound after returning to Earth, but nothing proved successful. Future Chinese astronauts also reported hearing the eerie knocking sound, leading some to believe it was caused by the spacecraft itself. The source was later attributed to changes in air pressure and temperature morphing the capsule's inner wall. Mundane explanation aside, we couldn't imagine how utterly terrifying that experience would be.
Dallas, are you sure there is no sign of it? I mean, it is there. It's gotta be around there.
Number 6. Kek Murders. There are literally countless creepy true crime stories, but there's just something really unsettling about the infamous Kek Murders. These took place at a farm in Bavaria, Germany in 1922. Prior to the murders, Andreas Gruber found human foot tracks in the snow leading from the nearby forest to his house. That night, the family heard footsteps coming from the attic, but failed to notify the police. On March 31st, every member of the household, including their daughter, her grandchildren, and their maid, were killed. It would be 4 days until the bodies were discovered. The still unknown murderer had long made their escape. This unsolved case truly has it all: gruesome violence, no survivors, an unidentified culprit, and an incredibly creepy case of home invasion. Number 5. The sad but creepy case of Henry Rathbone.
Shakespeare, how do you do? It's a great pleasure to meet you.
Everyone knows of Lincoln's assassination, but the role played by Major Henry Rathbone is less common knowledge. Rathbone and his fiancée were attending the play with Lincoln, and Rathbone tried subduing John Wilkes Booth after he shot the president. His artery was severed in the process. Rathbone survived, but he blamed himself for Lincoln's death and spiraled into insanity. On December 23, 1883, he assaulted his own children, and when his wife intervened, he took care of her before stabbing himself in a failed attempt at his own life.
I'm not gonna hurt you. You didn't let me finish my sentence. I said, I'm not gonna hurt you.
When police arrived, they found a deranged Rathbone and his wife's corpse. Number 4. Chernobyl. The world held its breath throughout the spring of 1986, desperately hoping that their respective areas wouldn't be inundated with radiation. On April 26th, a reactor at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant exploded, sending enormous plumes of radiation into the atmosphere. This radiation was then carried far and wide by the wind.
Who's the next closest?
It's Chernobyl, but that's not possible. They're 400 kilometers away.
Oh, that's too far for 8 mini Rontgen. They'd have to be split open.
It was given the maximum severity on the International Nuclear Event Scale, and it resulted in an extensive cleanup effort that took years and billions of dollars to complete. Nearby cities were completely evacuated and are now eerie ghost towns. Many people also suffered unimaginably horrible deaths from acute radiation syndrome as their bodies shut down. Chernobyl was a living nightmare that struck the fear of radiation into millions.
What happened there, what happened after, even the good we did. All of it. All of it. Madness.
Number 3. The eruption of Mount Vesuvius. The ancient Romans experienced hell on Earth in 79 AD when Mount Vesuvius famously erupted. The eruption launched a massive cloud of gas and debris 21 miles into the air, effectively blocking out the sun. This in turn caused a tsunami in the Bay of Naples, and ash rained down on nearby cities. The volcano later released pyroclastic flows, which are essentially 18,000 degree Fahrenheit clouds of gas and volcanic matter that can travel upwards of 400 miles per hour.
This distinct layer of solidified ash is evidence of a high-speed current of heated gas and volcanic debris. Known as a pyroclastic flow,
the flows decimated the nearby cities and killed people instantly, vaporizing their blood and organs. The eruption buried the cities of Pompeii, Herculaneum, Oplontis, and Stabii, killing at least 1,500 people based on the human remains uncovered, but likely many more.
The exact nature of the pyroclastic density current. In some instances, it's very, very light and fluffy, but you can have temperatures from 200 degrees centigrade up to maybe 700 degrees centigrade. That's not unheard of.
Number 2. The Mary Celeste.
Bad luck plagued her from the beginning. On her maiden voyage, her master fell fatally ill.
Ghost ship stories are a dime a dozen, but none is as arguably popular as the Mary Celeste. This was a sailing vessel built in Canada and named the Amazon before it was wrecked and sold to American buyers, who renamed her the Mary Celeste. On December 4th, 1872, the ghost ship was found floating off the Azores Islands.
It was not leaking. The sails were damaged, those that were
were up and had not been furled or damaged. Aside from that, there was no real structural damage to the boat.
The ship was in good condition, there was nothing recent in her captain's log, her provisions were undisturbed, and the crew's belongings were still on board. However, the lifeboat was missing, leading many to wonder why the crew had abandoned ship. Naturally, conspiracy theories abound to this day. And while numerous sound theories have been put forth over the years, the mystery remains unsolved.
But the riddle of that ill-fated voyage in 1872 will haunt us forever. The mystery of the Mary Celeste will live on.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into your settings and switch on notifications. Number 1. Plague, Riots, and Refugees.
For 3 horrifying years between 1348 and 1350, the Black Death pushed medieval man to the brink of an apocalypse.
The Black Death wasn't just the deadliest epidemic of infectious disease in human history. It killed an estimated 30 to 60% of Europe's entire population. Seriously, the entry can just end here.
For the Almighty has said, I shall wipe man whom I created off the face of the earth.
But it also turned into what's probably the closest thing we've ever had to a real-life zombie movie. London quarantined plague victims inside their homes, and armed guards were reportedly stationed nearby to prevent escape. This didn't sit well with the quarantined, and they often fought back by attacking, and in some cases, murdering the guards.
Law and order broke down. Tight-knit communities broke apart.
This led entire neighborhoods to be quarantined, which only instigated rioting and more death. If some plague victims happened to escape, they wandered the countryside pretty much like zombies, as no towns or villages would permit them entry. In some cases, they were even attacked on the road by the healthy.
In one 6-week period, 11,000 people are buried in a single graveyard.
Which real-life event do you think is more terrifying than fiction? Let us know in the comments below. Check out these other clips from WatchMojo, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.